Okay, we're on YouTube Live now.
Hi,
Hello.
good to see you.
Hey, Councilman Hyman.
How are you? How everybody? Good evening.
Hello.
Sorry, I'm chewing, but I've been running all day. I haven't eaten anything.
That's okay. Mr. Snell, Alexa. Miss
Hello,
Pat.
everyone.
We are live on YouTube.
Oh, wow. Well, hello, everyone.
Hello, how are you?
I am well. You know what? I think Happy New Year's are in order, aren't they?
It is.
Happy New Year. I am eating like Dr. Hyman, so that's why my camera isn't on. Okay. My apologies.
That is fine.
You're a little bit more professional than me, I see. I just ran in here, and actually, it's a donut, honestly, because I was like so fast. I do have
Good
my
afternoon, Leo.
Hey, how are y'all?
Wonderful. Just be careful what you say. You are live on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
What do you mean? We're always careful what we say.
Yes, Good afternoon, Ann.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Mr. Scott. You're muted if you're just talking to us.
I was just saying good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good evening, right? It's evening. Hi, Mr. Scott.
Good evening, afternoon, all.
Mr. Scott, you have permission to share your screen tonight too.
Hi, Monique.
Hi.
Hi.
I must say it was so nice to meet a few of you in person at the volunteer appreciation event.
That is true.
It
That was a really nice event.
was. I agree, Ann. Happy New Year. You weren't on when I came on.
Happy New Year to you, Rashaki.
Good afternoon, Carl, and I'm glad to know your link is working.
Good to see you, Julian.
Carl, you may be running the meeting. It's 6:01.
Brian's here.
Hey,
Oh,
yes,
he is
sorry.
there? Oh, hey, Brian, I didn't see you.
I will say though, Carl, my internet has been randomly dropping out the last few days. So if I do drop off, feel free to take over for me. And then we're
I'm
gonna-
not sure where Mr. Johnson is. Colin, do you have your phone near you that you can call him?
I do.
Can you give him a call? I don't know where my phone is. I'm at home, though, but
Is he on vacation?
no, he's back.
Okay. Yep, I'll give him a call. Give me a minute.
All right, thank you.
Brian, we might want to wait just 1 minute for other folks to join. We also
Yeah.
don't have quorum yet, so.
I'll wait. Usually I'll try to wait until like 6:05ish just to give people time to slowly pop in.
There he is. Hi, Mr. Johnson. You're muted.
Good evening, good evening.
All right, thanks, Colin.
We'll just give it another minute or so. In case anyone's running a bit late. Do we have a quorum right now? Quorum's 8 people.
Quorum's 8. We have
I think 7 is what I counted.
we have 7, yeah.
All right,
Oh, there we go.
perfect. We have 8.
Yeah, I have been on, let me hang up on my phone. I have been on my phone. We have an internet outage in my area, but apparently when you log in on the phone, it automatically mutes you. So I tried to jump in a couple times, but it wasn't letting me speak. So sorry about
No,
that.
no worries. Glad you were able to get in.
Yeah, luckily I was able to use my hotspot.
All right. So with that then, I will call a meeting to order at 6:04. Thank you all for coming. I hope you all had a great holiday, relaxed a bit, are kind of getting back into the rhythm of things. I know for me, January is always a struggle to, have time off and then do things again. But welcome all. Thanks for being here. And I'm going to turn it over to Leah to do the roll call.
Hey, everyone. So just say here, come off mic if you will. So Valen Alford.
Here.
Robert Brown, not here yet. Myself, Rashaki Furness.
Here.
Alexa Hartenstein.
Here.
Alexa, do you prefer both last names? I have both last names listed for you.
Hartenstein's fine.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Amy Jones. It's not here yet. Brian Langloss.
Here.
Anne Rebeck. Oh, there's Amy.
Here.
Richard LeBennett. Not here yet. Seth Candle.
Here.
Carl Newman.
Here.
And Amy, perfect timing. Are you present? Nope.
Here, I'm sorry. I had to do a Zoom update.
No problem. Like I said, perfect timing. Wonderful. Back to you, Brian.
Thank you. So as always, the first thing is going to be just approving the minutes from last meeting. So hopefully everyone had a chance to look over them. And so I'll open the floor for discussion if anyone has any comments or edits to make or things they noticed wrong with the minutes. All right. Hearing no comments, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes as is.
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Then we'll do just a voice vote. So all in favor of the minutes, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. All right. No opposing votes. We'll pass the minutes as they are. And then the next thing is welcoming back Anthony Scott again to give us an update on Durham Housing Authority and some of the new grant work they have and the work they've been doing. So Anthony, I will hand it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you. And I will get us going. So I want to cover today the recovery agreement, and I'm picking up essentially where we left off last time. And at first I want to ask, I know that some of you were able to attend the meeting, the tour that we had, I believe it was last month. So I was glad to see some of you out for that. And I hope you learned a little bit, something a little bit new about what's going on with DHA. So I want to start with the recovery agreement and give you guys an update on where things are progressing with that. Everybody can see the screen okay?
Yes.
So just as a refresher, because the housing authority did not score well with its conditions of its buildings, we ended up becoming what's called a troubled housing authority, which means that our overall score, which is based on 100 points, dropped below 60. And the majority of that was directly associated with the conditions of our properties. As a result of that, we had to negotiate and then ultimately agree to something called a recovery agreement that was signed on February 15th of 2022. And it outlines very specific accomplishments that we're supposed to have over the next 2 years. Those things are essentially 3 key categories. 1, we must increase our occupancy to 95%. We must improve our unit conditions to a passing score of 60 minimum, and that's on a 100-point scale. And they want us to remove McDougald Terrace from the public housing inventory, which is a creative way of HUD saying you have many different options as to how to accomplish getting McDougald Terrace out of the public housing program. Anything from you can sell the property outright to doing a redevelopment of the site. And clearly we're not going to do the former, and the latter is what we propose to do. All this needs to be accomplished in 2 years. And we knew going in, and we in fact expressed it to HUD, that wasn't really possible given what we knew about what's going on out there in the world, everything from the challenges of hiring people to hiring people as employees, as well as hiring contractors and a whole host of other things that are sort of the COVID tail, if you will. We have since March of last year, we have been providing HUD with monthly updates, showing them what our progress has been on these various items. So for number 1, with respect to our occupancy, we have more than met that goal. And number 3, for McDougald Terrace, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, we are in the planning stages of that. We are required to provide a plan for how we're going to take McDougald Terrace out of the public housing inventory by February of this year. We're on track for proposing that to HUD. And the biggest issue, which we knew going in this, was going to be the improving our unit conditions. And this is a challenge not only because of the staffing shortages that we face and the difficulty we find in getting contractors, but because the cost of getting our properties to passing score exceeds what we really have on hand. And we expressed that to HUD, and we were able to do this study, which is called the physical needs assessment. And what that does is it looks at the conditions of your properties, and it makes a calculation as to what would cost to actually repair those properties and get them to an acceptable level. Our physical needs assessment indicated that we would need about $48 to $50 million over the next 5 years to get our properties where they needed to be. we will actually end up collecting about $15 million over that 5-year period from our funding sources. So clearly, we're right back where we've always been, which is having more issues than we have funding. And what we are going to be doing is proposing to HUD with our $15 million roughly that we'll have over the next 5 years. We're prioritizing the health and safety issues within our properties, and then those items that will help improve our score. We think through that approach, we'll be able to get our properties up to at least that minimum score. The other piece that this doesn't consider is for some of the properties that are not passing or did not pass, they're going to be part of our redevelopment efforts going forward anyway. But that's an overview quickly of where we are with our recovery agreement and where things stand. I'll pause to see if there are any questions that you all have before we get into the other items.
Is there a list for which ones didn't pass?
There is, but I don't have it with me, but I can tell you which ones did not pass, or it's easier to tell you which ones that did probably. McDougal Terrace surprised everyone in that it scored a 70. That was up from a 31 the last time they did their testing. So we actually improved the score by more than what we even scored the last time around, by 39 points. The other sites that did not pass include Cornwallis, Oxford Manor, the sites that were redeveloping 519 East Main Street and Liberty Street Apartments. And that made sense because given that we're doing emptying buildings and things like that, that all had an impact on that scoring. And I believe there's one other, but I cannot recall that. I did not think to do this, but I should have provided you all with I have a slide that shows like what properties passed and which ones didn't. So I apologize for not having that. Those that did, I think Hoover Road, I believe Club Boulevard also did not pass. Hoover Road did, and the others that I didn't mention did pass the inspections. And the one thing I'll say about the whole REACT inspections and the passing or not passing, the minimum scores are, not anything that we aspire to get to. I mean, we do because we're below that, but it's not the quality of housing that we want to have. And that's one of the frustrating things about this too, is that we're, trying to get to a 60 score minimally, but it's nowhere near what the standard that we want to have for our housing. It's one of the primary reasons that we're focused on this redevelopment effort is that we are not beholden to HUD in the same way that we are now if we're able to do redevelopment, because we are, one, able to fix the properties properly and or completely rebuild them. And then two, because the financing is not 100% depending on the federal government, we're not necessarily dealing with the ups and downs of congressional authorizations of funding. All right, I will move on and we can come back to other questions after we get through this. Next up is DDNP, which is DHA's Downtown and Neighborhood Plan. You've seen this a gazillion times, I'm sure. It focuses on our downtown sites. That is approximately over 50 acres actually, and it's 447 units in addition to DHA-owned land. The original plan included 2 parcels owned by the city, which is Hunt Street in blue here at the top. And then you had South Side phases 3 at the bottom. Those are city-owned sites. And then the others that you see are DHA-owned. And this is our office. And just adjacent to us is the county's Criminal Justice Resource Center building. And although we're not going to be touching the Criminal Justice Resource Center building, it will include the land that wraps around it. So the DDNP plan, as proposed in 2019, looked like this. It was a combined total of over 2,500 units of housing, including the city sites. They're kind of grayed out because the city sites are not under control of DHA, and they're being developed at this point separately. And this was the plan that was presented back then. So you can see we had almost over $500 million of total development. in the property, almost 2,500 units. You have the city sites there, plus our sites. And you can see many phases of development and projected at 10 phases of 9% low-income housing tax credits. And that's important because Durham can only win one of those a year at best. So we're looking at a 10-year build out based on just the 9% tax credit process alone. This is what a updated version of that looks like. And again, we've taken out the 2 city sites and just focused on the DHA sites. And you can see we have fewer 9% tax credit properties, which is a good thing in the sense that we are not beholden to the annual 9% process, still have 17 phases. Costs have gone way up. And that's a combination of increased numbers of units, because you see over 2,500 units just for the DHA properties alone, but also, and everyone is no stranger to this, the increase in cost, both in terms of construction, and now the new challenge is increasing interest rates. All of those directly impacts projected cost. And where we are with our DDMP, starting with the J.J. Henderson and the new J.J. Henderson at the time. So J.J. Henderson, 177 unit tower. That property is the only one in the downtown plan in which we were going to keep. We're doing a full actually, we've done a full renovation of that site. And then adjacent to that is building of a new construction site. So back in, I think December, we had or maybe November, we had our grand reopening of the J.J. Henderson Towers. That site now has been fully renovated. It was about $16 million in actual construction cost, and then another $16 or so million in other related fees and costs associated with it. The city's contribution was $3 million. And this was during our grand opening. As a great picture of the mayor sitting there looking out the window of a furnished unit. Next up is the Joyce. If anybody's been on Duke Street or Moorhead, you see that this property is coming along really well. We are about 90% complete. We expect to be finished with this by March of this year. This will be 80 units. It costs approximately $19 million with $3 million coming from the city of Durham. And one of the things about this that's really kind of neat is that we have what I call the campus, because it has the J.J. Henderson site, which is here in the front portion of the site, and then you got the Joyce that kind of wraps around J.J. Henderson. But you also have the Miracle League field, which starts at the corner of Blackwell and Moorhead, and goes all the way up to that. Well, it goes there, but just that whole nice site now that you got from that corner all the way up to where the JJ is really has changed the look and feel of that corner. The Miracle League field, for those of you who don't know, it's a field that is built and used primarily for disabled youth. It's a nonprofit throughout the Triangle. They have a Miracle League field in, I believe, Chapel Hill or Raleigh. They have one in Durham, and they're building one, I think, in Chapel Hill as well. So after many delays, it is almost complete and ready to go. So in the spring, they'll be having the Miracle League baseball season here, and I think they also have a season in the fall. The other great thing about this is not only is it making use of that corner, but you see the track that's here. That track is one of the things that we were excited to have, because many of our residents at JJ had complained that there's not really a place for them to do exercise. So they now have this nice little mini track that runs around the Miracle League field. Next up is our Liberty Street in 519 East Main site. This is a 5-phase development. It has a combination of senior and family housing. It also has retail, commercial space, and office on the Main Street side, where you see phase 5 along here, kind of in that salmon-ish color. This is 214 units that existed on the site. We'll be demolishing all of that, and it'll be replaced with a total of 555 units. The first phase is Elizabeth Street Apartments, It's 80 units of family housing. Cost us $24 million. With all the inflation, it was originally only 18. But we had to put an additional $6 million into this property to get it going. The phase 2 and 3 is called Commerce Street Apartments. And that's 2 phases. It was going to be proposed as a 9% low-income housing tax credit, but some changes to the tax credit rules made it more feasible to actually develop both of these at the same time as one proposal. You get more units and it fits the 4% model, making it more cost-effective than the 9% model. This is a combined $52 million, and we are having $8 million in city contributions. We were very excited that we began the demolition, or completed now, the demolition of the first phase of that, which is for the Elizabeth Street Apartments. That was done back in December as well. And coming up in the spring will be phase 2 of the demolition. And that will consist of these 8 buildings. I think it's a 6, but it's really, I think it's 8 buildings over here as well. And then construction will begin on both phase 1 in March and phase 2 somewhere around June or July. So we're very excited about actually getting this site off the ground. In addition, I'm sure you all heard about the $40 million Choice Neighborhoods grant that we actually won. I think the last time I talked to you, we spoke about us having an application in, and we were expecting to hear at any moment. And we were one of the 4 awardees across the country of this in our case, 40 million. That's the max that we were eligible for. 70% of the grant will go towards the housing construction. 15% will go towards what's called the neighborhood component, and 15% will go towards the people component, or about $6 million each. So for the neighborhood component, that's the monies that goes towards efforts that are outside of the primary site. So we are investing $500,000 into the Hayti Heritage Center, another $250,000 into connecting Hayti community to downtown. We have $1 million that's going to be utilized for environmental remediation along the Fayetteville Street corridor, and another $4 million towards loans for small businesses. And then on the people side, that's a kind of a case management support services programming that we'll have over the 6 years of the grant. In fact, it'll extend beyond that because of some of the great partnerships we have. It will work with the families from everything from assisting them in getting jobs, improving their education and the support that they need throughout that 6-year plus period. As mentioned, the grant is 6 years, and we're very excited. In fact, tomorrow we are going to be hosting HUD on an in-person site visit and tour of the community as part of the sort of on-the-ground kickoff of this grant. Next up is just a quick update on the other 2, really 3 sites associated with DDMP. The first is the Fayette Place site. This was initially proposed as a 500+ unit site when we did the initial RFP. The response that we received back ended up having a 700+ units development on that site. We have been working with the developers both in refining this site and conducting a series of community meetings in refining the site. And we're down at the final stages of negotiation on a master development agreement and also what this will ultimately look like. This is some of the retooling as based on those community meetings that we've had. So instead of being, for example, all apartments, we actually have 2 phases of this that are home ownership. Phase 1A here at the top, which will have 44 townhome units, and then a phase 1A down here at the bottom, which will have an additional 34 for sale townhome units. So we were able to incorporate some of that in this after refinement and a lot of feedback from the community. We also were able to add a little bit more commercial here on this corner. And we are still looking to see if we can expand that commercial development piece as we're continuing to look at some other opportunities as well. So in February, we expect to be able to come back to our board for an approval of a master development agreement to get work started on this 20+ acre site. Actually, it's a little less than 20 acre site. Next up is Forest Hill Heights. This is a 15-acre site, a really exciting development concept here. This will include over 700 units of housing on this site. We are looking to get at least 105 of those units that'll be affordable housing, including replacing the existing 55 units that are there, and another 62 or so units that will be additional workforce targeted housing. It also has 72,000 square feet of commercial, as you can see in this particular rendering, and a really exciting sort of plaza area in which this whole area will be community programming that'll be happening throughout the year. We are also getting closer to negotiating our MDA, and we expect to have that before our board of directors in February as well. And then lastly is the DHA office in the criminal justice building that I talked about a little earlier. So this represents the existing criminal justice building right here in the middle. And then here on this corner is the Cuban restaurant, or used to be Cuban restaurant. And so the idea is to build around the existing, I think I have a, yes, you can kind of see here, the idea is to kind of build around, oh, sorry, this is Forest Hill. Next slide, sorry. So this is the criminal justice building. DHA office is currently here, and we're sort of building around the criminal justice site, including addressing parking by redoing the existing parking deck that's there. This is projected to have about 258 units. Again, everything we're doing is going to be mixed income between affordable housing and up to and including market rate housing. And since we're on Main Street, we're also including some commercial retail space as well. This is a snapshot of the affordability projections that we initially presented as part of DDMP. So what you see here is what we presented to you all being the community in 2019. So you can see the total number of units and the affordability levels. So it's 2,275. This is just for the DHA sites, remember, not including the two city sites. And then this is what our numbers are looking like currently, where we're additional 269 units are being built. However, on the downside is that with the increase in construction costs and now the interest rates rise, it's putting a significant squeeze on us in terms of being able to get affordable units. So you see we end up losing quite a bit of the 80 AMI units as a result of those increases in cost. And we do, however, gain an additional 96 units at the 50% and below area. And the number of unrestricted units are at 491, which is a little less than what was originally projected as well. One of the things about all of this work, until we have a signed deal and development is coming out of the ground or about to come out of the ground, these numbers are going to change. They're going to change as we respond to market conditions, whether that is increased in costs or interest rates, either going up or down. Not usually cost goes down a whole lot, but interest rates do kind of bounce around a little bit. So that will have a positive impact if interest rates goes down. And obviously, if interest rates continue to go up, it's going to have a negative impact. And it's going to mean a reconfiguration of numbers and units and things of that nature. One of the things that I know that sometimes people will get uncomfortable with is when I talk about hard numbers when I do these presentations. But I think it's important that everyone understands that numbers you project are just that. They're projections until you get the deal signed and get all your financing in place. McDougal Terrace, I talked about the redevelopment of that as an option for us. Just a quick overview again, it's 360 units. It's our largest public housing site. It was built in, the last phase that was built in 1953. It's on 35 acres. And of course, anyone who's been around since 2020 knows that we had the carbon monoxide crisis back in 2020. We spent $10 million addressing that carbon monoxide emergency, as well as doing additional repairs related to that. And, you know, I talked about earlier how McDougal Terrace had a significant jump in its scoring. Well, that's why. $10 million of investment will get you a better score every single time. The downside to that, though, is that we didn't get any additional money for that. It literally wiped out all of our reserve funding. It has put a significant crunch on DHA and its ability to provide assistance to its other units, as well as staying caught up with a lot of our vendors. We're working through that. We are negotiating something with our HUD field office that will give us some relief of close to $3 million. But that's it. We're just going to have to continue to manage with a significant amount of our funding sort of going to one specific site versus the other roughly 1,400 units or so. The exciting thing about this McDougald Terrace redevelopment opportunity, however, is that like with everything we do, we don't look at it in a myopic way. We look at not only the McDougald Terrace community, which is outlined here, but we also own this Lincoln Apartments community. It's about 10 acres. So combined, you have 35 acres roughly in these two areas. But we also looked around. Obviously, we got our partnerships with North Carolina Central. We had to the right here, we have Durham Tech. And then we even found a partner down here in the North Carolina State Agricultural Foundation. And we also had conversation with Durham Public Schools. There's R.N. Harris Elementary School here, Burton Elementary School here, conversations with Parks and Rec, a variety of other key partners in and around this area. That's important so that what we do is not in isolation. The one thing that we are going to make sure we do going forward is that what we build is going to be integrated into the city of Durham and not isolated within the city of Durham. And so it means having time to plan and look at ways in which we can make these sites and the resulting developments that we do more comprehensive and much more integrated into the larger fabric of Durham. And so I've blown this up a little bit to just kind of show, kind of zoom in on the McDougald Terrace community here in Lincoln Apartments. And this is what our first round of looking at what we could do on this site. I'm going to tell you now, this will change because of some more recent developments that we've had in our discussions with Durham Public Schools, which we're not at liberty to get into in any significant way yet. But this gives you a sense of how we could reconfigure the McDougald Terrace community so that we create a mix of density. The lighter yellow is lower density, the darker yellow is higher density. We want to do something to address this pass-through of Lawson Street and then integrate more park space in much more conducive ways throughout the development. So that's where we are today until we get to the point of saying this is our actual decided upon plan, which will be in the next probably month with our first round of that. Then we'll get feedback from HUD. What we submit to HUD in February, they'll then give us feedback and then we'll refine based on that and come up with a solidified plan for what we'd like to do at McDougald Terrace. And then lastly, just a little bit on homeownership. In addition to what we're talking about on Fayette Place, we also had a partnership with Habitat for Humanity. Remember, we talked about this before with 2 different sites. This is the last phase of the old Hope 6 developments, these 37 lots that we have. They're split on these 2 sites, one by Edgemont Elms, one by Franklin Village. This is a photo of the last family getting their house that was taken back in December. They currently have 33 homes that have been sold to homeowners. There are another 4 to go. They're all out of the ground and pretty much buttoned up, but they're just doing the finishing touches on them now. And so by the summer, we will be 100% complete with those 37 homes and also 100% complete with the Hope 6 development that started, almost 20 years ago. So with that, I am complete with my presentation. I will stop sharing. And I guess I should turn my camera back on. That will be helpful.
Thank you, Anthony. That's great. Seems like definitely a busy few months of with some good wins in there. So I do have a few questions, and I know the answers to some of these are probably going to be up in the air, kind of being sorted out. So I guess to the extent that there may or may not be answers to these, you mentioned HUD has kind of like a 2-year requirement for addressing some of these issues.
Mhm.
But especially for like McDougal, it seems like, rebuilding that and restoring it, that is very clearly more than a 2-year project. So are they looking for just like 2 years to come up with a plan, or like how are you kind of negotiating that with HUD?
Yeah, specifically, it says the first year we need to have a plan and get that plan approved by HUD. And then within that next year, we have to have begun the development process, soliciting a development partner, that sort of thing. So that's actually what the 2-year mark is. Initially, they were saying, you need to get it out of public housing inventory in 2 years. And we're like, there's no way we're going to be able to do that. I said, even if we wanted to, how do you move 300 plus families and where are they going to go? Because it's not like we can just go and knock on the door of a landlord and say, hey, I have a family I want you to house. We, DHA, has to come up with those 300 plus units somewhere. We don't have them built. We don't have the vacancies because, of course, that's the other thing we said. It's like, so you want us to vacate McDougal, but you also want us to increase our occupancy. Well, that's clearly a conflict. And we noted that in the very beginning of this, and they never did get around to answering that question, but we asked it every month when we turn in our report.
Yeah. Okay. That makes more sense then. Cause yeah, it was like 2 years to remove that. Seems like they're locking you into selling unless they but okay.
Yeah, we're very clear we're not doing that.
Yeah, that seems like a non-starter. And then my other question is, with some of those repairs, you mentioned you're looking at 40 to 50 million over like 5 years for the repairs for a lot of these properties.
Yes.
But you have about 15 million now.
No, we will have 15 million over that same 5-year period.
Yeah, that's what
we have about 4 or 5 now, and you get an allocation each year about 3 million.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I meant. Like, anticipate 15 million of like a 40 to 45 million. And so where are you kind of looking at to make up that difference at this point?
Well, there isn't a where are you looking at to make up that difference. Part of it is if we're going to redevelop a site, then that comes out of that pool, right? So for example, included in that was in fact the Liberty Street apartments in 519 East Main. So it won't cost us as much to fix those properties because we're going to do the repairs that are necessary, but we're not going to do what might be 5 years out because hopefully 519 and Liberty will be completely torn down in that time period. So that's a part of it, a little bit of a shuffling of where you spend the money. But keep in mind, when you take units out of inventory, like what we're doing with 519 and Liberty, you also reduce the amount of funding that you get because the funding is based on the unit itself.
Mm-hmm.
So the bottom line is we have to prioritize those issues. And what I said in the earlier presentation is that we're going to prioritize health and safety issues first and foremost. And then we're going to focus in on those areas that will give us a higher score.
Okay. And my last question before I'll kind of turn it over to anyone else who has questions is looking at the planning, and I know you've kind of anticipating getting a few of these like 9% credits and things like that. Mm-hmm. How are those like 9% credits awarded? Is it like a competitive thing? Is it kind of, what is it like the likelihood of actually getting them year to year that you need them versus like what's the plan if you don't get them?
Right. So if you looked at the slide, remember there were 17 phases and there were 10 of those phases that had 9%. And in the second version, there were 6 that had 9%. So the thinking with those is that for those that we had targeted as a 9%, which is a competitive process, by the way, for those that are targeted for 9%, if we didn't get that 9%, then we could maybe shift that to become a 4%. And then we could look at the next phase as being a 9%, right? Mm-hmm. So it was that's one of the beauties of having a multi-phase site is that you can try to do a little bit of that manipulation. And an example of that is the J.J. Henderson rehab was the first 9% that we applied for. We did not win that 9% when we applied. So we shifted that and we actually came back to the city and said, we'd like to invest, I think it was about $2 million additional dollars into that. into that JJ property. So we were able to get it going because it's tied to the Joyce. We had to get that going in order to be on time for the Joyce. The other sites can be broken up. Like if you looked at the 519 and Liberty site, you have 5 almost independent phases. So you can start one of those without having to start the other based on how it's laid out. So it's kind of this game. And we hope by having multiple phases, the way North Carolina does it, that we can stay on track with the development and hope that the next phase, the next year, would actually be able to win the 9%. Worst case is if that option is not available, to shift from a 9% to a 4%, and the 4% are non-competitive, by the way. But as you can tell by the difference in percent, you'll get literally about half the money. So that means you got a bigger gap, right?
Yeah.
And so with the 4%, we hope that works for some of these other sites. But if worst case scenario, we needed a 9 and you can't do anything, then we just have to wait another year to go in and bid for that next phase.
Okay, thank you. I'll open up for anyone if anyone else has questions. Rashaki, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Kind of expounding on what you just asked, Brian. Mr. Scott, thank you. Wonderful presentation. You know, I'm truly honored to sit on this board and just learn about the city, you know, in this way. It's really exciting. I just wanted to know, are there like control limits in place, minimum and maximums in regards to the housing where there will be mixed income? I know you can't project, you know, you can only project so much what inflation is going to be like and so on and so forth, but are there control limits in place that says, you know, we will not go any further than having at least this many, or, you know, the maximum of this many? And if not, you know, is it too late to consider that? And if so, what are some of the, I guess, buffers that are in place to, you know, kind of help with that?
All right, so I'll try to answer that this way. First and foremost, remember I talked about on all of these downtown properties, we have a total of 447 units. So we have prioritized that we will replace each of those 447 units, and it will be done within that downtown boundary area. So we're not going to go and place them, you know, outside of the downtown core. We want to make sure they stay there. We do have a priority, though, of deconcentrating the poverty, so the mixed income. So not all of those units will be on any one particular site. And so where the example would be, are you all familiar with the Willow Street Apartments? If you look behind Mr. Johnson there, that's the Willow Street Apartments near the transit station. So we were able to transfer 21 units over to that site. So those public housing units now are no longer on the original Liberty Street Apartments site, but they've now been relocated into the Willow Street Apartments. We're going to do the same thing with the 2 county sites, the 300 block, which is right across the street from our office. I see it every day. And the 500 block, we've agreed to put another 22 units in the 300 block on Main Street at that site. We're going to put 44 units on the other side of Liberty and Main Street, the 500 block, that's also where the county is now got construction going on between the police station and the human services buildings. So we'll put another 44 units there. And if there are other developers that are working within the downtown area that are interested in accepting what these called transfers of assistance, then we'll place them there. Beyond that, we are doing greater density because we're downtown. It's one of the reasons why we focus here, because it's downtown and you can increase the density. It fits the fabric of the downtown core. So that's why on the Liberty and Main Street site, we have 214 units. We're going to go up to 500 and something. So we can put units back on that site as well, have other higher income units, which means we're collecting higher rents, which means we're getting more revenue in, so we can maintain those buildings not only day to day, but when those big cost items, the capital items come due, we put enough money aside to be able to take care of those major repairs. That's the whole philosophy. That's why we're moving away from the public housing model where we're 100% depending on a pretty fickle Congress. We all know with now the Republican control of the House, we don't know how that's going to impact our funding in future years. One of the things that we lost, in addition to losing control of the House as a Democratic place, our Congressman, David Price, was the chair of the House committee that determined how much money went to HUD. When he retired in December, we lost a whole nother advocate that I don't know how that's going to get replaced with respect to public housing funding, and that's for funding across the country. So those are the things that we as housing authorities have to sort of manage from year to year, from administration to administration. We never know what's going to happen, how they prioritize, and how we get funded. I hope that wasn't too convoluted.
No, it was perfect. Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you.
Mr. Scott, this is Councilmember Harmon. Do you know who took over the spot on, have they elected someone yet?
Well, Valerie Fushi has been elected in his seat.
Right, I know that.
On the subcommittee, it doesn't work like that. It's based on seniority.
Okay.
So we don't know who is going to, I can't remember who the ranking Democrat would be. That is the highest ranking Democrat would be on that. I don't know if they've changed the highest ranking Republican on that committee, because that was Diaz-Balart when Congressman Price was there, and the two of them worked together really, really well. They did wonders for us in terms of funding HUD and housing authorities. So I don't know if he's gotten reappointed to that committee, he being Diaz-Balart. If he has, that's actually hopeful for us because he truly worked well with Congressman Price.
Well, the reason why I was asking, and maybe I can find it, is that maybe our committee can actually do a letter to the new chair, just kind of talking about like what has happened in the past and still advocate for those some goals. That would be an advocacy letter from us. And I'll try to find out, or we'll try to find out together who is the new appointed person. Thank you.
It just got appointed.
It looks like it's Mike Quigley was the next in line.
Okay.
I'm seeing if it's the House Appropriations Subcommittee for Transportation and Housing, I'm seeing Kay Granger of Texas. But it'll be whatever, they'll be a Republican because Republicans have the House right now. So
Right,
that'll be the majority.
But who's the ranking member on the Democratic side?
I know, well, I guess this is Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development.
Yeah.
Subcommittee and Appropriations, at least for the last Congress, the ranking one behind Price would have been Mike Quigley. I don't know if he's still in or not.
Right. And that's the thing, is that we don't know even who's going to be on those committees because they could take people off and that sort of thing. And so that's all sort of up for nervousness, really. So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll know soon.
Sorry. Thanks for being patient, Amy. I'll turn it over to you for question, and then Alexia will be next.
Back to the conversation about the 9% projects and the competitive nature of those. Are we as DHA able to kind of propose multiple projects in a given year? I know we could only get one, but if we've got 17 phases, I mean, I imagine a lot of those phases are happening concurrently. So could we like try and hedge the bets and say, let's kind of propose these three and hope to get one of the three, or can you only apply for one per year?
No, you can apply for as many as you.
Okay.
I think you can apply for as many as you want. I might need to pull that back. I think you are limited in how many you can apply for, but you can do multiple phases. When I say you, I mean DHA. Our development partners can apply for more than one, and that is part of the strategy, is to have multiple applications. Even in this last round, before they changed the 4% credit, we had the same developer had two different properties in. So both the Commerce Street phases, one was family, one was senior, we put them both in for 9%. Plus there were others who in the city who the community development department were aware of, who also applied. So that is a part of the strategy going forward. There's always to be at least two, but we prefer three or more.
So I'm going to jump in, if you don't mind, to add a little bit. From a community's perspective, we do need to think of the strategy to have more than one application going in in addition to whatever goes in from the housing authority. Because even if one just went in, it's still competitive. Because they sit in a category that competes against or with others applications from other parts of the state, and that one cannot be successful. And so then we would not have any. And so what we've done in some past cycles is deliberately and intentionally submit more than one application, made it would be housing authority or not, to ensure or maximize our chances of walking away with and a successful 9% application. Thank you.
Sorry, Alexa.
Hi, Mr. Scott. Thank you so much for that presentation. I am new to this group, so thank you for bearing with me while I try to understand everything. But it was really helpful to see kind of the future direction of housing and what's coming and the plans for growth. I think my question surrounds our existing housing structures, and this might have been addressed in previous meetings, but just kind of thinking about the housing that we currently have and how is maintenance being prioritized in that, and how is maintaining the current structures being prioritized? And I think HUD inspections are like only maybe once every other year. Is that correct?
No,
but just
HUD,
kind of,
yeah,
sorry.
HUD inspections are annual.
Okay. Just trying to think about what the plan is moving forward for getting like ongoing feedback from residents as far as livability and what issues need to be addressed so that we don't end up with another $10 million crisis. I'm sure you guys have talked about that at length.
Sure. I will say it this way. Two things. One, HUD does inspections annually. They hadn't done any for a couple of years because of COVID. And we also are doing inspections annually in addition to that. So that helps us prepare for our HUD inspections, helps us prepare to know what repair issues that we have. One of the things that we did, last year or the year before, is that we instituted a third-party work order system so that people could call this one number, those work orders get recorded, and they automatically go into our system. Whereas prior to that, we would often get complaints from residents that they put in a work order, but there was no trace of it, or the management office said they didn't get a call. The folks said they did. So this eliminated all of that by having this work order system. So those go directly into our system, and we can tell what work orders are outstanding. So that's what people tell us about. But then there's also things that people don't, which is why the inspections are important, so that we can keep up with what's happening inside those units as well. And then obviously on the outside, that's a lot easier, but inside is key. As I mentioned earlier, the challenge that we continue to face is we only have so many dollars that we get from the federal government to do those major repairs. Much of the repairs that we're doing are results of the major repairs that we can't do. So, doing a lot of plumbing fixes when we know that the plumbing lines need to be completely replaced. That's the sort of catch-22 that we consistently find ourselves in. And I should just note that this is not unique to Durham. This is, all my colleagues across the country are grappling with the same thing. HUD itself admitted back in, I guess it was 2010, and I have to give our current HUD secretary credit for saying it on the record. HUD did a study, and it indicated that our current day backlog of funding that we should have received is somewhere in the neighborhood of $76 billion nationally. And so they at least are acknowledging that there's a problem. We were, I'll say, cautiously optimistic with the Build Back Better Act that was proposed. There was over $140 billion in that bill specifically to do work in public housing. And as you know, it did not pass. So now what we're scrambling to do is to try to figure out with the multiple billions of dollars that have come in the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, is to figure out how we can tap into those resources around, for example, some of the environmental money that's out there, can we use that to do work in our public housing developments? So that's the work that we're all focused on now. When I say all of my colleagues across the country are trying to figure out, how do we tap into those infrastructure dollars and use that to be able to do repair work on our existing public housing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You know, I just wanted to encourage you and agree with you, Mr. Scott. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. And yeah, and, I've been here in Durham since, I've been in North Carolina since 2011, and Durham, oh gosh, I can't even remember, 2016. And, but so I've been here for a while, but my family is still back home, and my father is very active in the community, and they are having the exact same conversations.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I will tell you as a quick aside, the new CEO there is phenomenal. She actually used to be the HUD Assistant Secretary at one point. So she used to run Boston Housing Authority, and now she's back at Detroit, or not back at, but she's now at Detroit. So she's one of those that really can get creative and help figure things out.
And they are, but yeah, we are not alone.
We'll do Robert for one last question.
Hey, Mr. Scott, I was joined late, and thank you for the presentation. It helped to answer a lot of the questions I've had about the McDougald Terrace project and funding. It sounds like you have a challenge ahead of you. So I guess my last question would be, in the next couple of years, as you maintain the property, do you foresee if the units are vacated that you would leave them vacant or just try to maybe help to move some of the residents to other properties in Durham? Is that possible?
Both is possible. In fact, we've already started that. When I mentioned that we are transferring 44 units over to, 22 units over to the 300 block, those actually are coming from McDougald Terrace. One of the things that we're not doing is releasing right now. It makes no sense if we're on a path to take the property down, we're not releasing at McDougald. So as units become vacant, we're not releasing those. And then the goal is, once we get a block of units that are vacant, we want to take those down, because you don't want a bunch of buildings sitting around empty. That just creates and invites more problems.
Right.
So we'll be doing a combination of those things as we go forward, continuing to work with HUD. The good news is that with some of the other developments that we're doing, when I talk about this transfer of assistance, what that means is the funding that comes from HUD to support the operations of those buildings, those units, we simply transfer that funding to another unit, and it becomes what's called essentially like a housing choice voucher, a project-based housing choice voucher for another site. That allows us to make sure that, as I've talked about, we don't lose the units. We move the subsidy so that unit now becomes effectively like a public housing unit, but it's mixed in with other things. Okay. So we'll be doing a combination of that throughout. We're not releasing anyone at the McDougald Terrace site right now.
Okay, thank you.
Just on that same note, quickly, with so Lincoln's already vacant. Are those already? I haven't driven past there recently. Are those already coming down?
No, Lincoln was, first I want to just make sure everybody's clear. Lincoln was never public housing. It was some sort of affordable housing deal that had nothing to do with DHA. And when the property, and Mr. Johnson might be able to speak more to this, but when the property was essentially condemned by the city, the former owner basically gave it to DHA. And I think my predecessor at the time, his thinking was probably looking at McDougald Terrace and saying, if I can't renovate this or take it down, at least we could, do some build first at Lincoln, which is what we're doing. We want to build first so we can move people over to those units, and then we can take the buildings down on the McDougald side.
That's great. Thank you, Anthony, for your time as always. It's very much appreciated. And I always enjoy hearing the work you guys are doing and the successes you have. It's very encouraging all the time. So thank you again. I would ask, I know in the past you've been able to send us your slides in
Yes.
case any of the committee members want to be able to look at them later. If you can do that again, that would be much appreciated.
Absolutely. I'll forward them on to Juliet to pass on to you all.
Perfect. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
For the next item, I'm going to turn it over to Reginald to talk about the home and the home ARP amendment that has been in the works.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so I actually have Colin Davis, who's here with me, who's a homeless manager. You've heard from him. But one of the things we're going to talk about is actually 2 public hearings that are scheduled for February the 20th. One of them, and I'll talk about one of them and he'll talk about the other, is related to our home investment partnership program funds. As you know, that's always part of our annual action plan, and we plan how we're going to spend for that given year. But if we don't spend funds in those particular categories, we have to go back and do what we call a substantial amendment to the annual action plan. And what we've done is going back to several annual action plans to see whether we have money that's available in those action plans. And what we're doing is doing one big substantial amendment related to home investment partnership funds. And what's going to happen is that this is actually, some of them go back to 16, 17. And so what we're doing is wrapping all of those into one amendment. It's going to be total of about $4.5 million and over several years. And so that substantial amendment is going to be proposed at a public hearing before the city council on February the 20th. And so you'll have some information that you'll receive prior to that because it has to be on public display for 30 days prior to the public hearing. And so you'll see that, but I want to bring that to your attention now so that you can be on the lookout for it. And so with that, I'm also going to turn it over to Colin to talk about the second public hearing that will be held. That's also on home funds, but this is related to the American Rescue Plan. And so I'll turn it over to this is separate fund, same funding source, but separate funds. So I'll turn it over to Colin to talk about that.
Thank you, Reginald. So as Reginald said, we have these home ARP funds, and I have a presentation that we'll present at the public hearing. It's about 10 slides. If you want me to go through it here, I can, and I would apologize to the council member that she would have to see it twice, but
That's okay. I love to learn.
if you want me to go through it, it's sort of
Go ahead and go through it, Colin.
okay. It'll give you an idea of what these funds are, and as I like to call it, it is the ultimate HUD Franken program. It's a combination of home rules and emergency solution grant rules, and they smashed them together to create this pool of funds that we can use. So I will walk you through what this looks like for us. Give me one moment. All right. So part of getting these funds, we do have to talk to specific groups, and these are from the American Rescue Plan, as Reginald shared, that came out in 2021. And these funds are specifically targeted for individuals and families who are homeless, at risk of homelessness, or in other vulnerable populations. So that could include veterans, persons fleeing domestic violence. And the city of Durham has received a one-time $4.3 million allocation of these funds. And the funds must be used and spent by September 30th, 2030. So that's why we're in the process of getting our amendment in so that HUD can give us access to the funds so that we're able to put out an RFP so that the funds can be used in a timely manner. So these funds are specifically targeted for 4 specific categories. The first is the acquisition, rehabilitation, or new construction of rental housing, including single room occupancies, permanent supportive housing and affordable rental units. We can acquire or develop non-congregate shelter. We can do supportive services with these, or we can do tenant-based rental assistance, which is similar to the housing choice vouchers. The qualifying populations. So these are anybody served by these funds must meet the homeless definition, at risk of homelessness, fleeing, attempting to flee, domestic violence, sexual assault, or other populations where they're in that 30 to 50% AMI. In order to access these funds, we have to go through public participation, including the speaking with specific stakeholders. So Department of Social Services, Housing Authority, the intimate partner violence groups, the DV providers. There's a few others that are specifically mentioned. We have to describe the home ARP, how those funds will be used, complete a gaps analysis, and have a summary of the planned use of the funds. And we have to get these submitted to HUD by March 31st. So as of right now, these are the statistics from when we presented to the Homeless Services Advisory Committee in December. So as of our 2022 point in time count, we had 459 persons experiencing homelessness in Durham that night. 144 were unsheltered. You can see the other statistics here. And as of 12/8, there were 24 families and 101 individuals who were unsheltered by self-report. And that self-report is important because we don't have anybody out verifying that, yes, 24 families are in fact living in their cars, or 101 people are living in campsites or other places not meant for human habitation. We do have approximately 8,255 renter households in Durham that are below 30% AMI, who were spending more than 50% of their income on rent. And in December, we had 25 families and 31 individuals who, by self-report, were saying they were going to become homeless or lose their current housing due to affordability issues within 14 days. We also have roughly more than 500 persons fleeing intimate partner violence on an annual basis, based on what we've heard from Durham Crisis Response Center. And one of our big challenges in Durham is we've seen a reduction in properties willing to accept high barrier households exiting homelessness, and also more providers, housing providers, landlords not willing to accept third-party payments. Currently, we have 97 beds available for families and 172 beds for individuals. All of those are occupied, and that left us a gap of 125 households who, even if they wanted to, there were no shelter beds available. We do have 357 beds available for permanent supportive housing, and those are always full. And when they do turn over, they get filled very quickly. So we had 154 chronically homeless persons during our 2022 PIT count who need that intervention or would qualify for that housing option if it were to be available. We also had 182 beds available in rapid rehousing, and that number increases and decreases based on how long people are in the program and how long it takes for people to be able to sustain the rent on their own. So in order to use these home ARP funds, we need to use them to address the priorities identified in our needs assessment process. They're one-time funds, and which makes using them for supportive services or a tenant-based voucher not as attractive, because at the end of 2030, those funds would be gone, and you would have people potentially with a voucher not having any way to continue paying their rent. And the funds must be used for activities within the city of Durham. And depending on the scale of activities, we may have to combine these with other funding sources. So that would be looking at combining with CDBG or regular home or tax credits or dedicated housing funds, or any other number of funding streams that may come into play to make a project viable. So the question that we've been asking everybody is, how should we prioritize the use of funds? And the prioritization is split two ways. The first is, what type of structure would you use it for? Would you use it for affordable housing, non-congregate shelter, supportive services, or for tenant-based rental assistance? And then the next category, the next question that has to be answered is, out of the qualifying populations, which qualifying population should be prioritized at the top of the list, knowing that all of them are deserving. So that's would you take literally homeless, at risk of homelessness, or domestic violence, or low income at risk of homelessness? I think that is the end of those questions. So I'll take any questions you all have. I'm happy to answer as best I can.
Thank you. Amy, you put something in the chat. Did you have a question or follow-up for that, or just?
I think it was Anne.
Oh, Anne, sorry. I read the wrong name there.
No, I just work with people who go down to eviction court every day to pass out information. And last week, I was on a meeting on Thursday, and they were like, well, on Monday, there were 36 cases. On Tuesday, there were 60 some cases. And I mean, by Thursday, we're like over 100 cases. Now, of course, we know they're at all different stages in the process. So they may just their first notice, whatever. But I think what I'm struck by, Colin, is your last question, which is like, which of all these people who desperately need housing and funding are we advocating for? And I just don't know that there's really an answer to that. So anyway,
it is a good.
I don't have a question. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I will say, and I think it's important for us to remember that there's a difference between the self-reports that are coming to Durham, Entry Point Durham, looking for homeless assistance. That number is always going to be lower than the number of people in eviction court, just because 100% of evictions, if you're evicted, means you cannot stay in that house. But just because you can't stay in that house doesn't mean that you become literally homeless and have to go into the homeless system. So there's a big disconnect between those two numbers. And it's important for us to remember that on the homeless side of the ledger, we're really only looking at a very, very, very small number of people who evictions turn into literal homelessness and having to live out of a car or live in an emergency shelter or some other thing. A lot of evictions will, there's friends, there's family, there's another unit to go to. There's sometimes those types of solutions available for a lot of people.
We'll do a question from Alexa and then one from Valen.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I just wanted to know if you guys had started any of the conversations with stakeholders yet, and what they had to say, like DSS or the shelters.
We have. We started in December talking to people. We made a presentation to the Continuum of Care and the Homeless Services Advisory Committee. That's one of the key stakeholders that we have to hear back from. We've spoken to DSS. DSS wants to make sure that we don't forget about the elderly that fall into these categories, especially if we're going to go into some sort of a construction project, that we use some sort of universal design to ensure that we don't have barriers for elderly or physically disabled individuals for getting in and out of units. We've heard from the community. We did do a survey, and the results of the survey are leaning towards the affordable rental units, and set for persons and for households exiting homelessness was the higher priority of that group, what they were saying. And it was about I have to get the exact number, but it was north of 60%, close to 70% of the respondents were in the literally homeless and affordable housing. And then it quickly went down from there.
Thank you. Valen?
Hi, thanks for the information, Colin, and I apologize if I overlooked it, but I just had a quick question about how do you determine family, or how is that captured?
How is family, like how is a family defined?
Yes.
So in the homeless system, a family is defined by the household that says they're a family. So
Okay.
you could be a grandmother with a child and the child has a child. You could be a multi-generational family. You could be gay, lesbian couple with children, LGBTQ, however you define the family. The one gap we do have in the system for families are couples. That is a gap that we have where if you are a couple, regardless of gender, there is not a shelter set up that is geared for couples to go into. It's single male, single female, or families with children, but there isn't a space for that. And we've tried to address some of that during our non-congregate shelter with COVID, and it's had some mixed results. Sometimes it works very well. Sometimes it turns into intimate partner violence and needing to have police come and separate the folks. So, you know, what's the right solution? I don't know, but it's like everything else. There's no easy answers.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I guess where I was coming from is in some of my past experience, I know it has been a challenge for some families that are like a male parent and children and accessing some homeless services. Just as a social worker, not necessarily in Durham, but I've heard a lot of concern and difficulty with like single dads accessing services, homeless services. And so that's why I was curious in terms of how you all define it in terms of capturing these numbers. So thank you.
And single dads have, I will say, historically have been a challenge. However, I will say in Durham, we do have several single dads in shelters now that are for families, and we haven't had any issues. And there was also a time not that long ago, well, 15 years ago at least, where a family, if you had children above the age of 12 or 14, those children wouldn't be able to go into the shelter with you. That is now gone because that became a fair housing law issue that, you know, shelters were essentially setting up involuntary family separations to provide services. So a lot of the things that have been there in the past are sort of running afoul of fair housing laws. Even though you're not renting a unit, you're still a shelter and have to abide by those rules.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman?
Hi, thank you. And Collins and Reginald, I mean, I don't know if this question you're going to be able to answer it. So, you know, because of your expertise in this field, like if you had a wish list, where do you think the money, and Collins is laughing at me, you know, where do you think the money, because you have the expertise, you too, right? So where do you think the money would be best fitted for? If I had my wish list, I would want, of course, services, because again, we can get people in housing, but we have to be able to sustain them in housing. And I know we spoke about this before. So that would be my wish list. But anyway, what would be, from your expertise, you and Reginald, where you think the best buck for our money, you know, bang for our money would be? Do you understand the question?
Absolutely. You raise a really good point, Councilmember. You're absolutely right. We need the supportive services, but we also need the housing. And without the supportive housing, without the supportive services, it's hard to get the housing. So it's kind of we need to do both. And that's the piece that we're struggling with. In terms of a wish list, that is we are working through that on with the HSAC and the continuum of care, of trying to put together a wish list of, here are the big items and the big wants that we want in a 1 to 3 year time period, a 3 to 10 year. And if there was no time and no money issues, here's what that list would look like. I think when we get down to this, we'll have to see how it shakes out. But I suspect what we're hearing and where we really have big needs in the community is that permanent supportive housing. And for permanent supportive housing, that is really, you can't have permanent supportive housing without the supportive services, because people in permanent supportive housing often have mental health, substance abuse, or other medical issues that require ongoing supportive services and assistance with a variety of things, whether it be daily living skills or paying bills on time. And we do have people in the homeless system currently who, as soon as it's their turn to start paying their rent, they just say, just kidding, I'm done now. Thanks for paying my rent for a few months, and I'm not interested in using my money to pay rent, so I'll go back to homelessness. And how do you help that group to remain in housing when they have the right to make the decision that they don't want to spend their money on rent?
Thank you, Constance. So in my experience as a social worker for many years, we, especially in my practice years, again, being able to, because I used to be the director over housing subsidy at one point, we were able to get them housing. But again, you have to educate, use teachable moments to be able to say, okay, because you've been living under a bridge, or you've been in a tent, you don't know what it is to have to do, light, gas, and all of that, right? And then we throw them into this, and we don't give them the skill set to be able to keep them there. So it's like a revolving cycle. So that's why when I think of it, I think of my wish list is, yes, the permanent housing, but without wrapping those services around that permanent housing, guess what's going to happen? They coming right back in, and it's a revolving door. So that would be my wish list, but I just wanted to hear from you. You know what I mean? And then honestly, in my field, when I practice, I've had people say, you know what, I don't want all that. I'm going to live under this bridge because I don't have to deal with all that. And honestly, sometimes I want to join them because I don't want to deal with all of it either. Because I really don't want to have to be like, how do I pay this? How do I pay that? Because that's the reality, especially with things going up so high in Durham. It's affecting everybody. So, and I don't say that in a jovial way. I say it in a serious way. I always tell my students, we are all 2 minutes off of being homeless. You lose your job, that is it. So, yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I would just add, council member, that you see it's in many respects not an either or, it's a both and. And the question is, how do we do it with the limited resources we have? And, going to the permanent supportive housing, and the support has to be continuous for a while. And so we have to make prep. That has a cost. And, in my mind, when we talk about things, I have to translate it into money and resources. And when I hear it is continuous for a minute, and so how does one pay for that and make it sustainable? And we just, you can put all your money in services and not have the outcomes that you want, or you can put all your money in housing and still not have all the services you want, the outcomes you want, because you're supporting persons who won't have any services, and that's a challenge as well.
One last question before my other colleagues. Is there been any needs assessment of what other cities have done? I don't know if they've gotten this money too, or just to see what other people are doing. Because I know when I go to different conferences, I'm always trying to figure out what are they doing and what could we bring back to Durham? And I know the mayor just went to a conference for mayors, and she brought back some really interesting things around housing that she's going to try to, help us spearhead. But I was just curious, that's how people learn. What are people doing to kind of combat this issue?
So you bring up a really good point. Right now we're going through the process of telling HUD, this is what we want to spend your money on. But that's just really at the 50,000 foot view. And then once we tell HUD, hypothetically, we're going to spend it on building affordable housing for chronically homeless people that require supportive services. Well, then it's up to us as a community to say, all right, how many units is this going to be? What other funding sources are needed? what's the ongoing operating costs needed to make it work? And are there going to be ongoing supportive services? Because building a building is the cheap part. You know, building your building is $20 million one time. But then you're going to have, if you've got supportive services in there, insurances, people with no income, you're looking at, you know, another $2 million a year for 20 to 30 years. So that adds up really, really fast on the long haul. And you got to figure out, how do you bundle these? And that's just, you know, hypothetical numbers just for easy math, not one that you would, you know, say this is what it is, because all those costs are going to depend on level of care and actual cost as you develop and get in there for the long term. So a lot of jurisdictions right now are just getting the plans completed, and then it'll come down to sort of us figuring out what's that budget that falls within this, and then putting out a request for proposals probably, and seeing what the community comes back with and saying, oh, we can do, you know, whatever, this many units with these kind of supportive services for this length of time based on your budget. And then it'll come down to, who do we have the most confidence in being able to fund and having it carried out and having the outcomes that we as a community want to see happen.
So one last thing, I remember when I was doing some work, right, there was a federal funded program that I literally was part of. And I'm asking you this because we had a mental health program. We had Banana Kelly, which was a real estate program, a real estate agency, and then a mental health agency that we all came together and we wrote this proposal for federally funded money. And it was really a win-win. This was under the first Black mayor of New York City, David Dinkins, and that's when I was the director of that, right? And we pulled all those services together, right? And we pulled our pots together and we worked on this together. So if we had somebody who had a mental health issue, boom, we could send it right to which was Vision and Nerve Services. Somebody with the case management came to me, and somebody with the housing was supportive case manager at Banana Kelly, but we all work together. Are we going to be looking at RFPs to be able to do this collaboration RFPs? Because that'll work. I know it does work. I'm just asking because that would be, and then I just want us to also say one thing. Me and HUD are going to have a problem soon because I'm really tired. I'm tired of HUD giving us little piecemeal stuff and not really looking at it from a sustainable sort of, but that's my own thing, but go ahead.
So in terms of how the RFP will come out, I don't have any details on that. I suspect there will be plenty of room for collaboration as you describe, but without having all the details sorted out, it's hard to say we're going one way or another. But with all of our RFPs, even in the homeless system, we try and encourage, you know, partnerships where it makes sense.
So we do have a few more questions, but also we have some stuff on the agenda. So I just want to check with everyone's time. I don't mind staying a little bit longer if we have some quick questions. And then I know me and Carl just have a few quick things to discuss that are a little bit time sensitive, so I don't want to necessarily table them to the next meeting. So I just want to check in on everyone with time. If anyone minds staying another 10, 15 minutes.
That should be fine. My question is really easy. Colin, can you share your slides with Juliet and I'll put them in her minutes?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
And you'll get to see him again on this February 20th City Council meeting for public comment.
Wonderful.
Thank you all for donating a little bit of extra time. So we'll do a quick question for Robert, then we'll a quick question from Amy, and then we'll move on. You're muted, Robert.
I'm sorry. Just interested to know if there's any city partnership, maybe with a donated building. You know, many years ago when I worked in the county government, the sheriff's department needed an annex, and they took an old building, an old Sears building, and used it for an annex. And I just wondered, is there any, if you thought about, you know, talking to city council about looking for a building that the city's not using and upfitting that building? I mean, it's already there, wouldn't require construction.
We have not done any of that. It's too early in this process to do that, and that would be something someone could suggest in an RFP. we did look at several buildings and during the COVID pandemic, when I was in the Emergency Operations Center, of how to use some of the empty buildings around town that county or city had access to. And what basically came back was they're vacant for a reason. And
Right.
the cost to upfit them and get them there is sometimes more expensive than tearing it down and starting from scratch.
And I get that. I get that it's not directed at you. I get the political excuse. I get it. But example, case in point, the old police department. It's there. And we find money to do things to build bigger structures, but we don't find money to help people. So that's my point. That building could have been a perfect example of, getting your project off the ground and running in the right direction.
So I'm going to jump in and offer a little bit of comment on that because I'm privy to working with General Services on the assessment that they are actually doing on city-owned property, which most of it is the elements are parcels are vacant. They're not city-owned buildings, that are really vacant for just a general use. So, I know people have the idea that, the city or the county, but I'll speak to the city in particular because I've seen the list, has all this property that's vacant and just sitting there not used. It's actually a myth. There are parcels, but there are, parcels that, for example, you will see a parcel and yes, it's vacant, but then you would have utility easements that across it, which is why it's vacant. And then, you can't put a structure on it because of the utility easements are there. Or there are pieces and corners of lots that, are not buildable. That's one of the things. There are going to be some parcels that community development is going to go out with in terms of an RFP that we've accumulated some parcels, but what are the people who are going to submit for them have to see whether you can even build a structure on them because you have to have frontage and all that kind of thing and deal with easements. So it's a little bit more complicated than that, but that is something that we're looking at.
And
Okay,
Mr. Robert, just so you know too, that the city council has, in one of our meetings, and I know Mr. Reginald might have been there, they asked, we had a deep dive in what we're going to try to do with the old police station. And they asked each one of us, what do we would like to see if we could save it or whatever the case may be, what do we wanted to see? And I will say out of the conversation, most people wanted to see some level of affordable housing, commercial, again, making sure, that as you all saying that this is something that we can do economically wise, but most of us said that. And so that is something that we are working on to see what are we going to do with that. So I just want to let you know that, Mr. Brown.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Davis. Thank you again. Another informative presentation from you. You mentioned kind of a little bit of the timeline and how it is a long from now until 7 years from now. But then you also mentioned that this first checkpoint, I guess, in March is at that 50,000 foot level. So we're going to do this with this priority population. And so then can you just help me to understand, can HUD say yes or no there? And if they say yes, and then we take a few steps down the line, and then, there's another checkpoint a year from now, and they're like, oh, actually, no, on there. At what point can HUD not derail our plan anymore, I guess?
Sure. That's a great question. So at this point, we are turning in a plan to HUD. And that plan essentially has to check off a bunch of boxes. Did you talk to everybody HUD told you to talk to? Did you put numbers in these boxes? Did you do these things? And is your proposed use of the funds in alignment with what it's eligible? And if you can check all those proverbial bureaucratic boxes in the affirmative, they'll sign off on the plan and say, go ahead and move forward with your money. And then I don't want to say they check out at that point, but they essentially check out at that point. And then at some point, when you start sending in invoices, they'll do some, yes, you're spending it according to the way you said you would. And at some point down the road, they would probably come in and monitor to make sure that you followed all the other little rules. But once the community makes a decision on these types of things, as long as it falls within the rules of what HUD set up, they're not going to derail it 2 or 3 years from now. And the only reason I've heard of plans not getting approved so far is what I've heard from HUD is basically the plans that aren't getting approved are because people forgot to talk to, the domestic violence provider, or they forgot to talk to DSS, or they did talk, but they didn't specifically mention that conversation in their plan. So they're getting kicked back, and not rejected, but just kicked back for, technicalities.
All right. Thank you, Colin, for your time. Great
Absolutely.
presentation. I really appreciate it. And so we'll quickly move on. I'm going to turn it over to Carl real quick to talk about the community development funds that we have available.
So yeah, just we talked about this at our November meeting, and at the time we sort of said, if you have ideas for how we can spend this $1,000 before June 30th, let us know what you think is a good use for it. We didn't have a December meeting. It's already January. We got to spend this money by June 30th. And so in lieu of anyone having sort of a better idea, we're still kind of open to suggestions. But the thing that Brian and Lee and I talked about last week is sort of the next thing that Brian's going to talk about, which is probably trying to spend that money in connection with a public-facing event during a Community Development Week in April. And there's probably a couple of different ways to do that, but that is sort of the idea we're working with right now. And so if you sort of have ideas for ways to sort of spend that money and or have thoughts about Community Development Week, we'll probably try to roll those two things together so we can make sure we spend this money that we've been budgeted and get it again next year.
Thank you. Yeah, and as Carl said, kind of along with that, the next thing I wanted to kind of bring up real quickly is this Community Development Week. The past, seemingly forever ago now, but pre-COVID, we had done some in-person things, both kind of inviting people who've received grants in to kind of share, what they've used the money for and kind of, updates on their work. We've done some work within the community, whether that be, some like basic landscaping, painted some fences and did some gardening work for some properties. I know we did, food kitchens and things like that. And so we're hoping to do some of that again. The plan is to use some of these funds to kind of support that. So I guess my ask for the community right now is if people would, one, if you have any concerns about still meeting in person in terms of spending that Community Development Week, let us know. We can try to figure something out. But two, if you have any specific suggestions or things you would like to see during that week, it'll be in April. Please let us know as soon as possible. We do have to start kind of coordinating that and sorting that out. And so the sooner we know if people have specific ideas or thoughts or things they want to see for that, please let us know.
Brian, really briefly, do you want to mention maybe, because we have a lot of new faces, including myself since we've done it in person, Community Development Week. At the executive committee meeting, we discussed a couple of ideas, and these can be bigger, smaller, modified as folks see fit. But one, we could, tour subgrantees, right? So like try to go to some of the folks who use CDBG funding, some of the organizations that use it to provide services, etc. I will say that I personally would like us to be mindful of putting another thing on those folks' plates. And so like making sure that we're doing something mutually beneficial for them if we are asking them to do something for us. A second idea is maybe, it's the 10th through the 15th for Shockey. No problem. Another thing is maybe like a reception scenario where folks do come and they report on what they do, right? To us, they give a little kind of overview of their organization, their work, how the funding kind of figures into their work. And then we get to like feed them, these people who mostly work in nonprofits and, as we all know, probably don't get paid very much and also work a ton of hours doing very difficult labor. So that's an idea, or any of there are a lot of other possibilities, but if we really want to engage with the people getting the funding, that would be a couple of different ways to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, that's kind of there's kind of always two sides to it, is like engaging with the people who have received grant funding from us and things like that, kind of celebrating their work and their successes and things like that. There's the flip side of then also engaging with the communities themselves. And so in the past, you know, I mentioned my first year on this committee was like right the year before COVID. And I know, you know, I went with a group of some people on like a Saturday morning, and we helped do some like, you know, we painted some fences and mended some like gardens and things like that to kind of, you know, help them with kind of some of the odds and ends chores and labor and things that these groups have to do in the communities. Some other members went and helped, you know, serve breakfast in a food line and things like that, where you know, are actually kind of engaging with and seeing the communities firsthand, rather than, you know, sitting here in our meetings and kind of abstractly talking about them a little bit. And so yeah, we can do both of these. The tour, I know something, a tour was organized last year around some of the properties, and I know that was well received, and so that's something we can look into doing again as well. Yeah, and the money is it's $1,000 for this committee specifically. We can use it essentially to support the activities of the community, whether that be, you know, things like this where we kind of engage and facilitate interactions. You know, one thing we've talked about in the executive committee is, you know, whether we can use this funding to provide, you know, an iPad or a tablet of some sort in case, you know, we have a member who like doesn't have, you know, regular access to the internet for meetings and stuff, like providing them a tablet or something that they can access, so that, you know, we expand, you know, who can actually, you know, engage on the committee and things like that. And so there's kind of different options and that we have for how we can spend this money, but it is, yeah, for this committee to spend on our activities and how we
Brian, can I ask you, what's the mission? What has been the mission for Community Development Week in the past? Like,
yeah, that is a good question. It has been vague to me. I will admit that. Like I said, my first time on was right before COVID, and so that is very much in the past and kind of hazy. During COVID, we haven't done it as much. But my understanding is to really kind of highlight and support the communities that we're trying to support, engage with them, and kind of provide a kind of a face that both our grantees and the community members they serve can kind of familiarize themselves with and have kind of a direct access to.
Mr. Chair, I do. So that's one part of Community Development Week. It is a national week where the purpose is for us to highlight, as one of the localities and recipients of CDBG and home funds, to highlight what we do in our community with those funds in particular. And there'll be a resolution that will be presented before the council. And all of this is rolled up to the National Community Development Association. And what we try to do is try to present some and highlight what we're doing in our community in different ways with these funds. And so that's documented, we can share that. And it can be part of what all the other communities are also doing as well.
So I like to see the information get into the community. You know, bringing the information to maybe a community forum at one of the parks, which is we can get for free. Well, I don't know if we can get for free, but I might be able to. But anyway, but bringing it to the community and really educating them on, you know, what we're doing, like to the people. That's what I like to say. But anyway, I'm gonna shut up.
You never have to be quiet here. We like the lively discussion. So has been the theme since I've joined is people speaking their minds. So I'm always happy for that. I mean, these are all great ideas and things we can consider. And again, we're always happy to hear ideas and would welcome, if people have thoughts, let us know, the executive committee know, as we're trying to kind of figure out how we're gonna spend these funds. So
Also, if anyone wants to volunteer to plan what we do, let me know.
that is fair too. We can also, if a committee member wants to take lead on Community Development Week, we are happy to put together kind of the core group of people to take lead on this. So.
Well, to that, I just want to act, we've thrown out a lot of ideas here this evening, which I'm sure will be in the notes. It's January. Can we, plan to kind of vote at least to narrow it down at the next meeting? Just, have them listed, all these ideas listed, and, next meeting, we need to be kind of narrowing it down, because I don't want to, preemptively volunteer if I don't think I'll have the bandwidth or capacity to, depending on what it is,
That's perfectly fair. How about, let's say this, let's say over the next 2 weeks, email us your suggestions and I'll put together, simple thing of like, hey, these are all the suggestions we have. I might group some of them if they're kind of very similar things, and I'll send those out to everyone. So we have kind of 2 weeks to think about them, mull them over, how would you approach them if you were like running it and things like that. So that when we get to the next meeting, the ones we have on that list, we can discuss and vote on. And then people, if they want to take lead on putting it together, we'll already kind of have an idea in mind for the ones that get passed. So does that sound good?
Sounds great to me. We don't have to repeat that if we've already brought it up in the meeting, right? Or would you like us to?
No, you're good.
Okay.
Okay. But if you want to be doubly sure, feel free to send us repeats. But yeah, we'll be able to pull them together from the notes and everything. All right, thank you. So we'll bring this back up next meeting. And also as a reminder, these funds we have and the Community Development Week, they do not have to be tied together. As the executive committee, we thought that would be kind of a nice way to kind of facilitate Community Development Week, but that's not a necessity at all. So just want to remind people of that. So moving on, we'll move on to any public questions or comments. I think we have a few attendees. If you're able to let them in, Juliet, for any comments or anything, if they have them. Kyle and Terrence, welcome to our committee meeting. We'll open the floor if either of you have any questions or comments you'd like to share. All right, in that case, we'll move on to announcements. I personally don't have any. I don't know if the committee has any announcements or news they'd like to share.
I do have an announcement at the appropriate time.
It's all yours, Reginald.
Thank you. I would just like to take this opportunity to share a bit of bad news, but I guess it's also good news. This will be Juliet Black's last meeting with us. Yes, I see some folks shaking their head already. But yeah, she's moving on to higher heights again for the second time and returning to the mayor's office. And so this will be her last meeting with us. And I'm going to miss her greatly, dearly, sorrowfully. But I appreciate all the work that she's done and the commitment that she has to the CAC. And so I just want to let everybody know that this will be her last meeting as she's going to move on to greater things.
Congratulations, Ms. Black.
Congratulations. We are going to miss you, but I am so proud and happy for you.
Thank you so much.
I don't know how we're gonna keep things on time or on track or well coordinated now, but the mayor's office is definitely getting some very strong person joining them. So congratulations, Juliet. That's great
Thank
news.
you. I appreciate it.
You know, I'm happy.
Is this your doing? Are you just stealing members and
I would never do that,
our
Brian. Not at
support,
all.
of the staff, bringing them in?
No, it was not Councilman Hyman who did it. No, it was not.
So thank you, Juliet. Thank you for your service.
Thank you all.
Thank you for the work. And that concludes my announcements, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Congratulations again, Juliet. You will be very much missed here.
Thank you.
On that sad note for us.
Brian, don't say sad.
For us, it's great for you. No,
Brian's
it's
like, great for
wonderful.
you.
Any other announcements?
Brian, I'd like to make an announcement that, you know, on our city, during our city council work sessions, usually we have been having presentations and doing a deep dive in housing. So I do recommend that our committee kind of look at some of those. You can actually go back and actually look at the videos too, but it's been very enlightening for us as council members to get that deep dive and to get the statistics and the data around housing so that we can hopefully make more informed decisions when we are voting on things. So I just wanted to kind of shoot that out because you can go back and watch it.
Yeah, that's a good shout out. And probably a good thing to do for all of us. Any other announcements? All right, in that case, thank you all for staying extra long today and all your comments and questions and engagement with the committee. Like I said, it's always wonderful to me being on a committee that the members are actually engaged and very passionate about the work and things we do. And with that, send in your suggestions for Community Development Week. We'll send them out back to you all.
One last question. Could you mark me present for today's meeting, please?
I did. I got you, Mr. Brown. No problem.
All right. And Ms. Black, we will miss you.
All right. And with that, we will adjourn at 7:54.